this module, we discuss filtering and the property ladder and how these contribute to the performance of the housing asset. Filtering is the idea that as new, higher value housing is built, higher income people move into it, leaving behind older, less expensive housing stock for lower income people to move into. The theory expects that as people's incomes improve over time, they will seek out better housing suited to their changing needs. With their improved affordability, they move out of their current house and buy a more expensive house. And the house they sell becomes new supply for the person who buys it from them. What this means is that affordable housing is not necessarily only delivered as new housing. It can also be delivered through the resale market, while developers are building new housing at higher values. Think about 3 houses, all different sizes, each occupied by a family. As each family grows or their needs or opportunities change, they may find that they need to move to a house that better suits their circumstances. In this example, the family in house A moves to house B, the family in house B moves to house C, and so on. When the family in house C wants to move and there is no housing suited to their needs, this is when a developer sees the opportunity and builds more housing. Meanwhile, house A, vacated, becomes supply for a new person or family moving into the area. In this way, each house becomes a home for a succession of households who move in and make investments and then move out. Multiplied at the scale of a city, this movement of people in and out, making choices about what housing they want and where it must be, making investments to improve the performance of their housing asset, fixing their homes to suit their evolving needs, all of this becomes a property market. You can see around you that the housing market includes many housing types of different sizes, shapes, and prices. This diversity is a good thing. It means that households can move from one housing circumstance to another as their needs change. We can also look at the property market from the perspective of the household, and in this case, a housing ladder is a useful metaphor. Think of someone coming to a city for the first time. They don't yet have a family and don't have much income. They might squat in an informal structure or rent a basic unit. Over time, as their circumstances change, they may want to change their housing to accommodate their needs. They might secure a more stable income that allows them to rent a better quality flat. Then they might meet someone and decide to start a family. They decide to buy a basic entry-level house. A couple years down the line, they have a baby, and then another. Their house is too small, so they have a choice. Some might decide to move to a larger house, while others might decide to take out a loan and extend their housing by building extra rooms. Eventually, the children grow up and move into their own homes, and the original couple might then decide to downscale into something smaller, or they might decide to stay put and keep their large home as the base from which to welcome grandchildren who come to visit. While the family is making these choices, the value of the housing asset, both for the individual and actually also for the housing sector, is changing. In this example, the rent that the person pays when he first moves to the city is income in the pocket of the landlord. She may decide to invest that money into the further development of units for rent or into her daughter's education. Then, when the person buys his first house, the seller of that house has money which he might use to buy another house or to invest in a small business. Over time, as the new family invests in their housing, the value of that housing changes so that when they finally do sell, the price that they get might be more than what they originally paid for it. This growth in value is called equity. When the elderly couple then decides to downscale, they sell their large home, use that money to buy a smaller home, and the balance, the equity, becomes funding for their retirement. Of course, it doesn't always work this way. In many economies, gaps along the housing ladder or blockages to supply mean that households are stuck in housing that is inadequate for their needs. In some cases, it's possible that they could afford a better home, but no such housing exists. Let's go back to the first example. Imagine that the family in house C wants to move, but there is no developer to build a house that they can afford, so they stay put. They do not sell and do not realize the asset value of their housing. Meanwhile, the family in house B then also has to stay put because house C is no longer available. This means that the family in house A also can't move, and this means that the newcomer to the city has nowhere to go. So, like so many households in cities across Africa, they find shelter informally, a shack or an overcrowded room, whatever they can find to just have a place to sleep. According to UN Habitat, about 60% of urban households in Africa live in slum accommodation. That is housing that is inadequate to meet their needs. This is a problem of the housing market. With gaps on the ladder and ineffective property transaction systems, filtering can't happen effectively, and filtering pathways are blocked. The market is neither serving housing needs properly nor promoting opportunities for housing churn and investment. With rising land and building costs, it's becoming increasingly difficult to deliver a house that low-income people can afford. Even a 15 square meter house or flat can cost more than $10,000, and even this is far beyond the affordability of the majority of urban households in most cities across Africa. Filtering helps ease this problem. It allows developers to build the cheapest house that they can build, not targeting the lowest income earners, but rather those in the lower middle income range. The houses that those buyers vacate in order to buy the new units then become the supply for the lower income earners. Finance is an important part of the puzzle. If home buyers can access an affordable loan to buy a house, they don't need cash up front, and the availability of the loan means that sellers can get a better price for their house. In this way, each sale generates money that becomes a deposit on the next home, and the sale of the next house creates a demand for housing higher up the income ladder. Without the sale and resale across the different rungs of the housing ladder, and without loan finance to support the buying of housing at each rung, the buyers of new housing is limited to people with cash. This is a very small market, which reduces the incentive to developers to build. In a functional property market, housing demand should stimulate the private sector to produce more houses, and these houses attract people who are moving up the housing ladder. It also then means that the burden on the state is reduced, as it can focus on housing at the lowest rungs for the most poor. So, to sum up, if the various factors that affect housing value are functioning and are supported, then housing can be an asset. If finance is available, then the value of that housing asset can be leveraged. This means that multiple housing opportunities are generated over time across many neighborhoods. It means that people living in those cities have housing choices and can move to better opportunities that their needs and capacity shifts over their lifetimes. This makes for vibrant urban environments. And if all of this is working, more people see the economic opportunity in delivering housing. We then see the emergence of more housing development companies, the creation of more jobs, and ultimately, the delivery of more affordable housing.